Hello friends, so today's video is going to be an overview of my thoughts on the 2022 new fantasy releases, and for today I'm specifically going to be going into first books in series. I will do the same style of video for new fantasy standalones as well as new fantasy continuations or conclusions to series, but for today we're just sticking to first books in series. So I have 16 books that I'm going to be tier ranking. I'm not going to be going into all that much depth in regards to what the books are about. So if you are looking for that information, I'll have my new releases wrap-ups and any in-depth dedicated reviews that I've done linked in the description bar down below. But this is just going to be kind of a, I really liked this one didn't really work for me, sort of a setup. The tiers are pretty self-explanatory. At the top we have this has potential to be an absolute new favorite. I cannot wait for the sequel. After that we have I really enjoyed this. I am excited for the sequel. Maybe not quite in the category of will likely be a new favorite of all time, but you never know because maybe the sequels will really seal the deal. Middle is just, I felt fine, I liked it. Didn't love it, didn't hate it. Maybe I'll keep going, maybe I won't. And then from there we have won't continue on. And at the very bottom we have just wasn't for me. Normally when I do these, I like starting in the middle and then working my way to the extremes because I just think it's a little more fun that way. But I'm actually going to go in order mostly with when I read the book. So it's pretty random. I'm going to start with Engines of Empire. And if you have watched my videos fairly regularly this year, if you saw my in-depth review for this one, I loved it. It's definitely way at the top. I cannot wait for the sequel. I need more people to read this series. Well, this first book, at least in this series. I thought it was phenomenal. I thought it was so interesting, so exciting. I really liked the setting. I really liked the different perspectives. I really liked the blend of traditional fantasy, things that we see mixed with these advancements in technology. I ate it up. I loved it. I can't wait for the next one. So definitely top tier. So good. After that, we have Daughter of the Moon Goddess, and I'm putting this in the will continue category. At the time that I'm filming this, the sequel has been released, and I have started it, but I have not completed it yet. But I did quite like this first one. It definitely has this sense of this retelling fairy tale feel. The individuals in the book are immortal, and there is a sense of timelessness to the story where you don't really feel like your feet are on the ground. You don't really feel like there's this sense of the same kind of stakes that you find with other fantasy stories. It all feels somewhat mythical, and I think the author captured that really well. It does mean that it's a little bit harder to connect to the characters, which is I think where this kind of kept me from putting it in the favorite category, but I did quite like this first book, and I am excited to keep going with the story in the second one. Next up we have Castles in Their Bones, and this story follows these three sisters from the time they were born. They have been shaped into exactly what they need to be for the kingdoms that they are being married into. It's very politically driven, but it is young adult, so it's a lot more accessible than some of the adult political fantasy. And I had a really good time with it. I had a lot of fun. I'm definitely going to keep going with it. It's such a nice break from the more epic fantasy. That's kind of what I say often about a lot of YA, but this one in particular, I just had a lot of fun with. It was the kind that you just don't want to stop turning the page. At least it was for me. So I had a really good time with it. And you know what? I didn't love it as much as Engines of Empire, but I still quite liked it, so it's going to go at the top. Next, we have A Magic Steeped in Poison. This is another one where, similar to Daughter of the Moon Goddess, I didn't feel extremely connected to everything going on, but I did quite like the magic system in this. I thought it was really interesting and really unique, and I felt for the character a lot in the first book. It's hard for me to not think of the conclusion to this duology, which actually I didn't like as much as the first one, and I think that is going to, of course, be in the back of my mind. So this one, I would say that the second one, which I know isn't on today's list, but the second one is in the middle, and I'm like, well, I like the first one more, and I definitely was excited for the sequel, so it's gonna go in the will definitely continue, just not necessarily a favorite spot. The next two, when I read them, I quite liked them, but the more I think about them, the less inclined I feel to definitely continue on, because there were some things about it that were a little clunky for me with my reading experience of them, and that would be City of Dusk and In a Garden Burning Gold. I found that there were aspects of both of these that I really, really enjoyed. With City of Dusk, I really like how intricate the world is. I really like how much the author put into this world, the different magic systems. I thought it was all really unique and it was interesting, but at the same time, it took so long to feel invested. And I also felt like the characters, their interactions, the dialogue, some of it felt extra young. They're young, but some of the dialogue felt a little extra young. And so I didn't absolutely love it, but I still enjoyed it. So it's going in the middle. And then with In a Garden Burning Gold, there's one perspective that I really liked. One perspective I thought was so interesting, and it had to do a little bit more with the world. And there's an aspect of that perspective that's a little bit more character building, especially with the relationship with another character. But then the other perspective, typically I really like political fantasy, but this one it felt like I didn't have all the information I needed to really have a grasp on everything that was happening and to feel the emotional punches the way I definitely think I was supposed to feel them. So both of these are in the middle. Perhaps I'll continue, but perhaps I won't. Next up, we have Book of Night by Holly Black. This is going in the, I don't think I'm going to continue. I thought about continuing on when I was under the impression that this would likely be the first in a series with a fair amount of books in it, but I think, if I'm remembering correctly, it's just going to be a duology. And the first book was just okay. The best part of it for me was the potential, because I thought that the magic was really interesting. It had to do with shadows. And I really thought it was quite creative and interesting and unique. And I was thinking, okay, well, this first book wasn't maybe my favorite, but let's keep going once we get more books. And then unless it's changed, I believe we're only getting one more book. And then I'm like, I don't really care, I guess. After that, we have The Stardust Thief. When I first read this, I probably would have put it in the second one, as I definitely will continue and I really liked it. But it was so fun and adventurous, and it just gave this sort of nostalgic feel that it felt cozy while I was reading it, even though I wouldn't categorize this necessarily as, it's not cute by any means, not heartwarming, but there's just something about the feeling it creates that I really liked. And so it is this 1001 Nights retelling. I liked what the author did with the concept of storytelling. I liked how she brought her own flair to something that a lot of us have seen before, maybe feels a little familiar, but she did something unique and original with it. And I'm really excited about the sequel based off where the first one leaves off. So I'm going to go ahead and put this at the top. Next up, we have The Final Strife. This is one that I am definitely a little bit more biased towards it in a favorable way, because I buddy read this with some of my friends and they all really liked it. And so even though I read it alongside them, I did not love it the same way that they did, but I had so much fun reading it. That said, there are kind of similar things to what I was saying about City of Dusk, where the world is really interesting, the magic is interesting, but some of the interactions between the characters and their dialogue felt a little young, and sometimes I was frustrated with the characters. Sometimes I was frustrated with them in a way that is actually satisfying because they're behaving like real human beings would. And then other times, it was more just that, okay, maybe some humans act like that, but it's also annoying. So it's kind of one of those things where I just don't think I fell in love with any of the characters. There was actually one character I really liked, but they're the one you get the least amount of time with. And I get why we get the least amount of time with them. We kind of had to create this sort of mysterious air about certain aspects of the world, but they were the most interesting character to me. And I'm like, oh, I feel like I would have liked it more if we got more time with them. So if there was a category in between middle and second tier, it would probably go within that. But I think I'm going to go ahead and put this in the middle. Definitely leaning on the upper end of the middle, though, as I do plan to continue, but I didn't love it. Next up, we have Half a Soul. I loved this. It was precious. It was charming. It was hard-hitting. It was cute. It was adorable. It's my favorite book that can be considered fantasy romance that I've picked up. It's not a steamy fantasy romance. It's just so adorable. It was so cute. I loved it so much. It's eccentric. It's fun. What other adjectives have I not used to describe it yet? I loved it so much. It's cute. So let's just put it at the top. This Vicious Grace. I also quite enjoyed this one. It was young adult, but it also had a lot of aspects that I really like in the romantic aspects of character relationships and stories, of which this one, a big part of it is the relationship building. I also felt like the stakes were there. I think something that a lot of fantasy romance doesn't quite hit for me is that balance between the development between the relationship and then also the plot. Sometimes it's like, oh, the plot's whatever. We're basically just here for them to hook up or for them to like fall in love. And then sometimes the plot is really significant and the stakes are really high. So then anytime you get any build up with the characters, you can't help but think, don't we have things to do? Isn't the world going to end if you two don't get it together? Like maybe pause over here and go deal with this. So it can be a really hard balance. And I thought this Vicious Grace, it hit that balance really well for me. So I think I got to put it at the top. I really liked it. Not as much as Half a Soul, not as much as, Engines of Empire, but it was fun. It made me happy. The next two are the only two that go in the bottom category. I did not hate these books by any means. I don't think these books are terrible books by any means, but I do not plan on continuing, and they didn't really work for me, sadly. And that would be Violet Made of Thorns and The Darkening. The Darkening has, sadly, the element to it where I really, really liked the beginning to a point where I was like, ooh, this is going to be good. And I was excited. I was telling my friends like, oh, I'll have to keep you updated about it. But right now I'm really liking it. And then the story definitely went in a different direction at one point, and the direction it went in wasn't really what I was hoping based off of what I got at the beginning. With Violet Made of Thorns, a big part of it is this sort of enemies to lovers relationship. And for me, it was just they were awful to each other, and they were basically telling each other all the time how much they hated each other. And then they'd want to make out. And then they were right back to being, I hate them. And then they'd want to make out. And I guess that is enemies to lovers, sort of, but that's not really the enemies to lovers that I like. I like when characters are forced to kind of examine their beliefs. They're forced to examine the things that they've always valued because somebody else who is on the other side makes them question, and then they in turn make the other person question. I think those kinds of stories, what works really well is it so facilitates this sense of being introspective and to examine your own ideals. And then also there's like the love story aspect to it, and that's what I like about enemies to lovers. With this kind of enemies to lovers, sometimes it works. This particular time, it just didn't for me. And then the last three, I'm just gonna go ahead and put all at the top. I actually had quite a bit of success with, I would say, the first books in series that I got around to this year. So we have Justice of Kings. Really liked this one. Really liked the examination of fairness, of morality in individuals when they are tasked with laying down the law and enforcing those laws on others. The Art of Prophecy might sort of maybe exists somewhere between first and second because it did lean extra hard on the cheesiness, but it did work for me. It's just I don't quite think that amount of cheese fits perfect with the amount that I typically like, but I still really liked the story. I liked the characters. I liked the world. I liked the pacing. I liked how it played around with some expectations that we usually have for certain tropes. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in the top. And then last would be Belladonna. Belladonna caught me off guard. I'm not really sure about the sequel because I liked the first one and I kind of wish it had just been a standalone. And I'm hopeful that the second one will be just as enjoyable as the first one for me. I thought it was such a strange blend of gothic, fantasy, horror, mystery, and I really liked that. But I could also see going into the second one and being like, this didn't need to happen. This didn't need to be here. Not that there's not clues along the way to the potential of the things that are alluded to. I just don't know if I need a second one, but I'm going to read it. And I liked the first one, so it goes in the top as well. That's it for a tier ranking of some of the new releases from this year, or at least the first books in series that have come out this year. Definitely let me know your thoughts on these. Where are you feeling really similar? Where do you feel totally different? What are some other new releases that I didn't mention that you really, really liked? I will likely, before the end of the year, pick up a few more new releases. Just didn't pick them up in time to be included on this list, but I will get around to talking about them next year, hopefully. But anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.